Hello and welcome to this week's Q&A, where I read a question that I've received from someone moving through one of my retreats, my 28-day Mindbody Retreat. And in that program, each week, anyone who's in the retreat can email me a question, and then I respond and I post it in the dashboard. And then I'm sort of, repurposing these questions for you. This question is about triggers. Here's the question. Can you say a bit more about how to manage triggers? When I get triggered, I usually feel defensive, but I don't say anything, or if I do, it's a short, sharp, shut down comment like, "You've got the wrong guy." I feel people misunderstand me. I love this question. It's very clear, very concise. His behaviour, how he's describing his behaviour, and I think one of the first things that I want to acknowledge is that he's aware of his behaviour, and that's what the retreat is helping him do, is notice his behaviour without judgment. And here's some of the responses that I have. The first thing to do is clarify what a trigger is. In my practice, a trigger is an emotional or trauma trigger is the memory of an upsetting or distressing event stored in our nervous system, and it sets up a sort of vigilance to protect the self from the threat of that type of event happening again. So become sensitive and vigilant for it, and of course then even more reactive. And the more important thing to say about triggers is that we often distort the reality of the threat. In this case, I'm responding to a question from someone who has identified their trigger reactivity as defensive. So there are different types of reactivity. This is just about being defensive. Defensive behaviours are common responses when people feel personally attacked, criticised, undermined, misrepresented, cornered, having their autonomy taken away. Anything like that is very common for people with defensive reactivity. And we can really hear that in this person's statement of "you've got the wrong guy." What he's saying to the person who he perceives is attacking him, criticising him, or misunderstanding him. He corrects him and says, "No, that's not me." So he's batting back straight away and he's also acknowledging it's a short, sharp, shut down comment, which is again a typical trait of a defensive person. It's just to shut it down and block it, and then usually kind of a little bit of a spitfire back, what I call the scorpion's tail come around and whips the sting. So that person would have felt really kind of put back, and I imagine there could have been a bit of a tension thereafter about that moment. People with defensive reactivity usually fall into the avoidant attachment category, usually. And as I say, they tend to be highly sensitive to criticism and can distort a comment as being critical or attacking when it may have been presented in a more neutral way. Their most common go-to defensive moves are rebutting with criticism back. So, "Oh yeah, well you," and then saying something about the other person and redirecting the blame. "Well, if you didn't do that, then I wouldn't have said that or done that." Justifying their behaviour, similar to what I just said there. Playing tit for tat. "Oh, well, you do that," and then again, it's defensive and it's deflecting. I'm taking all the heat off me and putting it back onto you by saying you do the same thing, so don't criticise me. And remember, if that is true, we need to talk about that in a separate conversation. And this is the important part about resolving conflict or little tense moments like this, and just staying with the one thing that if I'm the defensive person, I feel criticised and I need to self-soothe and calm myself down and then decide what I want to do next. What this person is acknowledging is that it happens very quickly. The trigger happens, and then the reactivity. So, main step one is when you're triggered is a breath in and just say to yourself, slow down and take your time to respond. Other behaviours are correcting the detail of what the other person has expressed or said, and stonewalling is probably the the biggest one. That's probably what happens when they're pushed to the limit, and then they shut down, and then there's no words, and they're behind their wall, and you can't access them, and they don't come out. So they're the sort of typical behaviours. The steps to softening defensive reactivity is as per the 4 weekly themes in the Mindbody Retreat. First of all, awareness, which this person has. Awareness of your tendency, and an awareness of when it tends to happen in your relationship, if that's when that's when most of these triggers happen, but they can happen socially as well, and in family dynamics. Acceptance, you can hear my dog scratching at the door. Acceptance of what happened, acceptance that I have a tendency, a trait and a tendency to be defensive, and I need to learn how to soothe myself so I don't criticize myself for that. Acceptance of the other person, that they have their own traits and tendencies that can trigger me, and that I don't resent them or judge them for that. We both come with our own protective behaviors. And then the third one is compassion, self-compassion first. Remember, oxygen mask on self first and then other. So the first thing I do is, really say it's understandable that you heard that as criticism, or you're feeling attacked and that you're wanting to lash out. And then compassion to the other person as well. And they're, just like me, they're probably feeling a bit uncomfortable or tense or defensive as well in their own way. So really neutralizing the heat and that urge to react, and take your time to respond. And when you're practicing all of this regularly, you develop self-understanding and self-knowledge. And that, my friends, is wisdom. You have the wisdom to know how to handle triggers and on any given moment. So there's a practice for you. Aware, accept, compassion, wisdom. If you would like to know any more about triggers, send me a message. If you have a request, if you have a question you'd like to ask, please send me the question. And also, if you'd like to know more about Mindbody Retreat, it's mindbodyretreat.com.au. And thanks for being here.